Every Sunday, I cooked a huge meal for the children who never came. I thought I was completely alone in the world until a stranger's letter that was delivered to my house by mistake revealed a heartbreaking family secret. Subscribe now, because what I decided to do next changed everything, forever. In my house, hope has a particular smell. It smells like buttermilk fried chicken sizzling in a cast iron skillet, like sweet cornbread baking in the oven, and like the sharp, cinnamon-laced scent of a freshly baked apple pie cooling on the windowsill. It's the scent of every Sunday of my life for the last 15 years. It is the smell of a door that is always open, even if no one ever knocks. I am 75 years old, and my life is a study in the geography of absence. My home in the small Wisconsin town, once bursting at the seams with the noise and chaos of 3 children, is now a cathedral of silence. My youngest, Jessica, lives in California, a world of sunshine and technology I can't begin to imagine, with a partner's name I only know from a single terse Christmas card years ago. My son Mark lives 2 states over, locked in a fortress of political opinions that deem the rest of us unworthy. And my eldest, Sarah, the one who always tried so hard to be the good daughter, lives just an hour away, but might as well be on the moon, lost in a fog of depression that has swallowed her whole. Still, every Sunday, I perform my ritual. It is a foolish, stubborn act of faith. I peel the potatoes, I flour the chicken, I roll out the pie crust. And then I set the dining room table. Not for 1, but for 4. I use the good china, the plates with the little blue flowers around the rim. I polish the silverware my own mother gave me. I fold the cloth napkins into neat little fans. I do all of this, knowing, with a deep, aching certainty, that the food will grow cold on the table and I will eat my meal alone, surrounded by the ghosts of the family I used to have. Today was no different. By 2 o'clock, the meal was ready. The chicken was a perfect, crispy golden brown. The gravy was rich and smooth. The pie sat on the counter, a masterpiece of latticed crust. The table was a picture of waiting, of welcome. 2 o'clock came and went. Then 2:30. The grandfather clock in the hall ticked with the slow, deliberate rhythm of a judge's gavel, each tick a verdict on my solitude. At 2:45, the phone rang. The sound was so sudden, so alien in the quiet house that I flinched, my heart leaping into my throat. A wild, ridiculous flicker of hope ignited in my chest. Maybe Mark's car broke down. Maybe Jessica is calling to say she's flying in for a surprise. I wiped my hands on my apron and rushed to the phone, my breath catching. The caller ID read, Sarah. A wave of relief washed over me. Sarah! My thoughtful, gentle Sarah. Maybe she was feeling better. Maybe she just wanted to chat. Sarah, honey, how are you? I said, my voice warm with hope I couldn't suppress. The voice on the other end was flat, devoid of all emotion. It was the voice of a stranger reading a weather report. I'm okay, Mom. A pause. I'm calling, she said, her tone clinical, because I need you to do something for me. For yourself, really. Of course, sweetheart, anything, I said, my mind still picturing her at my dinner table. You need to stop, she said. The words were quiet, but they landed like a punch. Stop what, honey? This, she said, and I could almost hear the weary gesture she was making with her hand. The Sunday dinners, the waiting, the whole performance. It's not healthy, Mom. You're just torturing yourself. You have to know we're not coming. Mark isn't coming. Jessica isn't coming. And I'm not coming. I sank onto a nearby chair, the receiver feeling impossibly heavy in my hand. But it's just, in case, I stammered. In case someone is in the area. No one is ever in the area. She cut me off, a flicker of irritation in her flat tone. You're building a fantasy, then breaking your own heart every week when it doesn't come true. It's masochistic. For your own good, for your own mental health, you need to accept it. It's over. The family you're cooking for doesn't exist anymore. Please, just stop. I couldn't speak. She was asking me to do more than just put away my pots and pans. She was asking me to tear down my altar. She was asking me to formally, officially give up on my own children, to lock the door and throw away the key, to accept that the silence wasn't a temporary state, but a permanent one. Okay, Mom, I have to go now, she said. Her duty done. The line went dead. I sat there for a long time, listening to the dial tone. The beautiful meal I had prepared with so much love now seemed like a grotesque mockery. My daughter's words, spoken from a place of her own brokenness, had done what years of silence never could. They had made me feel truly, utterly, and hopelessly alone. Her kindness was a blade dressed in concern, meant to sever the last thread of hope I clung to. She thought she was ending my foolish ritual. What she didn't know, what none of us knew, was that her call was just the first tremor before an earthquake that would be triggered in a few days by a letter that wasn't even meant for me. Sarah's words echoed long after the call ended. They did their work. For the first time in 15 years the following Sunday, my skillets remained cold, and my oven stayed dark. The silence in the house was different. It was no longer the silence of hopeful anticipation, but the flat, dead silence of resignation. I ate a can of soup for dinner standing over the sink, and the hollowness inside me was a vast, cavernous thing. I had officially given up. The door, which had stood open for so long, was now closed. Or so I thought. On Wednesday, I was out tending to my wilting rose bushes when Gary, our mailman of 20-odd years, pulled up in his little white truck. "Morning, Eleanor," he called out, his voice as cheerful and familiar as the summer sun. "Got a pile of bills for you today, and what looks like a seed catalog." He handed me the stack, and as I took it, a single, thick, cream-colored envelope slipped from the pile and fluttered to the ground. "Whoops," Gary said. "Slippery, Lun. That one's for the new folks next door, the Clarks." "No problem, Gary. I can take it over to them," I said, picking it up. "I should probably introduce myself anyway." He tipped his cap and drove off. I stood there for a moment, holding the letter. It felt heavy, important. The address was written in a neat, elegant script. I started walking towards my neighbor's driveway, but as I glanced at the return address in the top left corner, I froze. My feet stopped moving. My heart did a painful lurch in my chest. Lily Maynard, 142 Ocean View Lane, Santa Monica, CA. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I didn't know anyone named Lily Maynard, but I knew that last name. It was the last name of Jessica's partner, the one from the Christmas card she'd sent 8 years ago. And Santa Monica, that was where Jessica lived. 1,000 frantic questions exploded in my mind. Who was Lily? A relative of Jessica's partner? A friend? Why was she writing to my new neighbor? My hand holding the letter began to tremble. I knew what I should do. Walk the 50 feet to the Clark's mailbox, slide the letter in, and forget I ever saw it. It was the right thing to do. It was the legal thing to do. But I couldn't. For years, I had respected the silence. I had waited patiently, quietly, for a door to be knocked on. But the letter I held in my hand felt like a key to a room I had been locked out of for a decade. And the desperate, grieving mother inside me, the one I had tried so hard to quiet, screamed that I had to know what was inside. Back in the privacy of my kitchen, my hands shaking so badly I could barely function, I slid a butter knife under the seal and opened the letter. It was a federal offense, a sin against privacy. At that moment, I didn't care. The letter was written on beautiful, thick stationery, the kind with a wildflower pressed into the corner. The handwriting was young and clear. Dear Mrs. Clark, you don't know me, but my name is Lily. I'm writing to you because I am desperate. I am the daughter of your previous neighbor, Jessica. I know this is a long shot, but I found your name through an old public record of who bought my mother's childhood home, and you are my last hope. My breath hitched. Jessica's daughter? I had a granddaughter? I read on, my eyes devouring the words. My mom never, ever talks about her family. It's a locked door. The only thing she ever told me was that when she fell in love with my other mom, she told her parents, and they told her she was no longer welcome in their house, that they didn't want a daughter like her. The room began to spin. The words on the page swam before my eyes. No, 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 that never happened. I could never. I know I should respect her privacy, the letter continued, but I feel like a part of me is missing. I have your address, but I don't have hers. My grandmother's. I don't even know her name. If you knew her, if you have any memory of her at all, could you please tell me what she was like? Was she really so cruel? I just need to know. I lowered the letter, my body numb with a cold, terrifying shock. For years, I had believed my daughter was simply distant, that life and Miles and new love had pulled her away, but the truth was infinitely more monstrous. She wasn't just distant, she thought I had disowned her. She had raised her own child, my granddaughter, to believe I was a hateful bigot who had thrown her own child away because of who she loved. The letter in my trembling hand was not just a mistake in delivery, but a key to a locked room I never knew existed. A room filled with a history I didn't live and accusations I didn't deserve. My daughter hadn't just drifted away. She had been pushed by a lie, and I had no idea who had told it, but I knew with every fiber of my being that I had to find out. My quiet life of waiting was over. A hunt for the truth had just begun. The letter lay on my kitchen table, a piece of elegant stationery that felt like a bomb that had detonated in the center of my life. I must have read it 20 times, the words blurring through my tears, each reading twisting the knife of betrayal a little deeper. My daughter, my sweet Jessica, believed I had thrown her out. My granddaughter, a person I never knew existed, thought I was a monster. For years, I had built my grief on a foundation of sad, quiet acceptance. I believed my children had simply grown up and grown away, their lives becoming too big and too busy for their old mother in a small Wisconsin town. It was a lonely reality, but it was a simple one. The letter burned that reality to the ground. This wasn't simple distance. This was a lie, a deliberate, cruel and foundational lie that had poisoned my family for years. My first frantic thought was of my late husband, Richard. He had been a good man, but a conservative one, a man of quiet, unshakable principles. Had he said something to Jessica on the phone that I never knew about? Had he, in a moment of anger or disappointment, told her she wasn't welcome? The thought was a cold stone in my gut. But he was gone, buried 5 years ago. I couldn't ask him. The truth, if he held it, was buried with him. I couldn't call Jessica directly. What could I possibly say? "Hello, dear. I'm your homophobic mother who you haven't spoken to in a decade. By the way, I committed a federal crime and read your daughter's mail." And calling Sarah, in her fragile state, felt like poking a wounded animal. That left one option: Mark. My relationship with my son was a landscape of conversational minefields. We loved each other, I suppose, in the obligatory way a mother and son do, but we hadn't truly connected in years. His world was one of talk radio, rigid politics, and a deep-seated conviction that he was right about everything. Our calls were brief, sterile affairs, carefully navigating the treacherous waters of topics we could not discuss, which over the years had become almost every topic. I dialed his number, my stomach in knots. He answered on the second ring, his voice brisk and impatient. "Hi, Mom. Everything okay?" It was his standard greeting, one that implied that the only reason I would call is if something was wrong. "Everything's fine, Mark. I was just thinking," I began, trying to sound casual. "About the old days. About you kids." "Okay," he said, the word heavy with suspicion. "What about them?" "I was thinking about Jessica," I pushed on, my voice softer than I intended. "I was trying to remember. It all seems like such a blur now. Do you remember why she stopped visiting after she moved to California? It all happened so suddenly. Was there an argument? Maybe something with your father?" The line went quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was cold, stripped of any pretense of warmth. "Mom, I don't know why you're digging this up. It's ancient history. And it's simple. She made her choices. She decided to live a certain lifestyle, and that has consequences." "What consequences, Mark?" I asked, my heart pounding. "What are you talking about?" "Dad was disappointed in her. Of course he was. He had a right to be. And she knew it. She chose her life over her family. It's as simple as that," he said with an air of finality, as if closing a case file. "Some things are better left in the past. I have to go, Mom. I have a conference call." The line clicked dead. I stood in my silent kitchen, the receiver still pressed to my ear. He had given me nothing but the same tired, veiled judgments. He confirmed the disapproval, but not the outright rejection Jessica described. He hadn't slammed the door in my face, but he had pointed to it, affirming that it was locked and that some topics were not welcome. He was another brick in the wall separating me from my own child. My frustration curdled into a hard, cold resolve. Subtlety was useless. Evasion was everywhere. There was only one person left who might hold the key. The one who was closest to the pain. The one who had begged me to stop hoping. The one whose own sadness might just be the very heart of this whole mess. I had to call Sarah again. And this time I wasn't going to ask. I was going to demand an answer. I didn't give myself time to hesitate. My finger, guided by a cold fury, immediately dialed Sarah's number. She answered on the third ring, her voice as flat and lifeless as it had been on Sunday. "Hello?" There was no small talk, no, "How are you?" I cut straight to the heart of the matter, my voice low and steady, leaving no room for evasion. "Sarah, I'm going to ask you a question, and I need you to tell me the truth. I don't want to guess. I don't want you to tell me not to worry. I want the absolute, unvarnished truth. Do you understand?" The silence on the other end was heavy. "Okay, Mom." "Why," I said, each word a carefully placed stone. Does your sister Jessica believe that I disowned her because of who she loves? A sharp intake of breath, then a frantic, flustered denial. What? I don't know what you're talking about. Who told you that? That's crazy. The lie is crazy, but I know it's what she believes. I pressed on, relentless. And since Dad is gone and Mark claims to know nothing, that leaves you. So I'm asking you again. Did Dad say something to her that I don't know about? Or was it you? The dam broke. A choked sob echoed down the line, followed by another and another. It was the sound of a carefully constructed wall crumbling to dust. "It was me," she finally whispered, the words fractured by her weeping. "Oh God, Mom, it was me." I closed my eyes, my knuckles white as I gripped the phone. I leaned against the kitchen counter for support, my legs suddenly weak. "Tell me," was all I managed to say. And she did. The story tumbled out, a messy, tear-soaked confession of fear and weakness. Years ago, Jessica had called Sarah first, bursting with the happy, nervous energy of someone about to share their most authentic self. She had told Sarah that she was in love with a woman and wanted to bring her home to meet the family. "I panicked, Mom," Sarah cried. "Dad was already so angry about Mark's politics, the family was so tense, and I was in such a bad place myself. My depression, I felt like I was drowning. The thought of one more fight, one more big dramatic family scene, I couldn't handle it. I just couldn't bear it." "So what did you do?" I asked, my voice a dead calm. I told her it wasn't a good time," Sarah confessed, her voice thick with a decade of guilt. "I told her that you and Dad were old-fashioned and that it would be too much of a shock. I said she should give you space, give you time to get used to the idea. I told her not to come home for Christmas that year, that it would be for the best. I thought I was protecting you. I thought I was protecting the peace. But I was just protecting myself. I was just so tired of fighting." I listened, my anger slowly, sickeningly dissolving into a profound and complicated pity. The architect of my solitude wasn't a hateful bigot. The monster in my daughter's story wasn't me. It was a phantom I had never even seen, born from my other daughter's illness and fear. Sarah hadn't built the wall between me and Jessica out of malice. She had built it out of her own broken pieces, trying to shield herself from a storm, not realizing she was creating a permanent winter for the rest of us. The poison that had separated me from one child had been administered by another, not as an act of war, but as an act of misguided, selfish preservation. Knowing the truth was one thing. It was a bitter, jagged pill to swallow. But now I faced an even harder question. What in God's name was I going to do about it? The next Sunday was just 4 days away, and I knew with absolute certainty that it could not be like all the others. The time for waiting was over. Hanging up with Sarah, I felt no satisfaction, no thrill of discovery. There was only a deep, profound ache. My family wasn't broken by a grand, dramatic betrayal, but by the quiet, creeping cowardice of fear. Sarah and her depressed Hayes had chosen the path of least resistance, and in doing so, had carved a canyon between me and my youngest child. Mark had walled himself off with indifference. They were the gatekeepers to a home they themselves refused to enter. And I realized, with a clarity that was both liberating and terrifying, that I had to stop trying to get through them. I had to go around them. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I sat down at the old, clunky desktop computer in the corner of my spare bedroom. It was a relic, slow and wheezing, a machine my son Mark had set up for me eons ago for email and emergencies. I was not a woman of the digital age. My world was one of soil and flour, of handwritten recipes and worn-out gardening gloves. But the letter from my granddaughter, Lily, was a modern message in a bottle, and I decided to send one back. My hands, more comfortable with a rolling pin than a mouse, felt clumsy and huge. I opened up the social media page Mark had once insisted I create to see photos of the family. A cruel irony now. My profile was a wasteland, with a default picture and no friends. With a deep breath, I clicked on the search bar. My fingers trembled as I typed, Lily Maynard, Santa Monica. The screen blinked, and then there she was. Her profile picture showed a young woman with Jessica's bright, intelligent eyes and a smile that was all her own. She was beautiful. My granddaughter. My heart ached with a love so fierce it felt like grief. Her profile was public, a window into a soul she shared with the world. I scrolled through her posts. There was her art, moody, beautiful paintings of the ocean. There were snippets of poetry about finding your place in the world. And then there was a post from a few weeks ago. It was a simple question posed to her friends. If you could ask your grandmother one question, what would it be? That was all the confirmation I needed. She was searching. She was just knocking on the wrong door. I knew I couldn't just send her a message full of explanations and accusations against her mother. That would only create more pain, more drama. It would put this girl, this innocent, in the middle of our broken family in an impossible position. I had to do something else. I had to do what I had always done. I had to extend an invitation. I closed the laptop and went to my kitchen. I pulled out the flour, the butter, the cinnamon. I peeled the apples, my movements sure and steady, a rhythm I had perfected over 50 years. I baked my signature apple pie, the one that Jessica had loved so much as a girl, the one she always asked for on her birthday. When it came out of the oven, golden and bubbling, filling the entire house with the scent of home, I took a picture of it. I didn't stage it. I just captured it as it was, resting on my worn wooden kitchen table, a slice of afternoon sun falling across the lattice crust. It was a picture of warmth, a picture of welcome. I went back to the computer, I uploaded the photo, and then I opened a direct message to Lily Maynard, a girl I had never met, my granddaughter. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, and then I typed the truest words I knew. This is your mother's favorite pie. Sunday dinner is at 2 p.m. The door has always been open. Love, your grandmother, Eleanor. My finger trembled as I moved the cursor over the send button. This was it. This was my leap of faith, a digital knock on a door I hoped was not also locked. I was bypassing my broken children and appealing directly to the next generation, to a girl who was searching for her own story. I clicked send. The message vanished from my screen, sent out into the vast, silent ocean of the internet. I had no idea if Lily would see it. I had no idea what she would do if she did. I had no idea if I had just made things better or 1,000 times worse. All I knew was that I had done something. I had stopped waiting. I had knocked. All I could do now was bake a chicken, set the table for a stranger who shared my blood, and pray that for the first time in a very long time, I would hear a knock on my door in return. That Sunday morning, I woke up before the sun. For the first time in years, the silence in my house wasn't a heavy blanket of grief, but a quiet, humming stillness filled with anticipation. I went about my ritual, but every action felt different, charged with a new and terrifying purpose. I wasn't cooking for ghosts anymore. I was cooking for a possibility, a girl with my daughter's eyes and a story I didn't know. As I floured the chicken and rolled out the pie crust, I had to stop myself from constantly checking my laptop, from looking to see if Lily had read my message, if she had replied. I had cast my message in a bottle into the digital ocean, and now all I could do was wait on the shore. It was the most exquisite torture I had ever known. The meal was ready by 1:30. The house smelled like home. The table, set for 4 out of stubborn habit, looked beautiful and welcoming. I sat in the living room, my hands clasped in my lap, and watched the clock on the mantelpiece. The ticking was a slow, deliberate countdown. 1:55, 2, 2:05. With each passing minute, the fragile hope in my chest began to feel more and more like my old, familiar foolishness. Of course she wouldn't come. Why would a young woman from California drop everything to meet a grandmother she'd never known based on a single cryptic message? I was a fool. Sarah was right. At 2:10, I was about to stand up to begin the lonely ritual of packing the untouched food into containers when I heard it. It wasn't the phone. It was the doorbell. A clear, sharp, undeniable chime that cut through the silence of the house. I froze, my heart seizing in my chest. It couldn't be. For a moment, I was too scared to move, terrified that it was just a delivery person or a neighbor, a mistaken ring that would shatter my last hope. But I forced myself to stand, my legs feeling like they were made of sand. I walked to the front door, my hand trembling as I reached for the cold brass knob. I took a deep, shuddering breath and pulled it open. On my porch stood a young woman. She had a nervous energy about her, her hands clutching a cell phone. She had short, dark, curly hair and a small silver ring in her nose. But her eyes, they were Jessica's. The same bright, intelligent, searching eyes that I knew as well as my own. It was her. It was Lily. She held up her phone, and on the screen was the picture I had sent, the picture of my apple pie. "Grandma Eleanor?" she asked, her voice soft and a little shaky. The sound of my own name, my real name, spoken by the stranger who was my blood, was enough to make my knees buckle. "Yes, yes, sweetheart. It's me." We stood there for a moment that stretched into an eternity. 2 women on either side of a threshold, a 55-year gap between us. "She got your message," she said, a small, nervous smile playing on her lips. "I showed it to my mom. She just cried. I don't think she knew what to say. She's not ready to be here yet. There's a lot of stuff. But I had to come. I had to know." "I'm so glad you did," I said, my own tears finally beginning to fall. "So very glad." I stepped back and held the door wider. "Come in, please. Dinner is getting cold." We sat at the big dining table, just the 2 of us, the other 2 place settings a silent testament to a family still in need of mending. But for the first time, they didn't feel like ghosts. They felt like possibilities. We ate, and we talked. She told me about her life, her art, her love of the ocean. I told her stories about her mother as a little girl, about how she hated green beans, about the time she tried to build a tree house in the old oak tree, about how she used to steal slices of apple pie before it had a chance to cool. I was giving her back the small, simple pieces of a history she had been denied. As she took her last bite of pie, she looked at me, her eyes shining. "You were wrong, you know. My mom. She thought you were a monster. But you're not. You're just a grandmother." In that moment, I knew the road ahead would be long. The wounds in my family were deep and complicated. Healing with Jessica, with Sarah, with Mark, it would take time. It would take more than one Sunday dinner. But as I looked across the table at my granddaughter, at this beautiful, brave young woman who had crossed a continent to answer a knock on a digital door, I felt a profound sense of peace. The silence in my house had finally been broken, not by the ghosts of the past, but by the laughter of the future. The door had been opened. And that was more than enough. It was everything.